What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Down to Earth podcast. I'm your host, Red Young, and I'm here with Kristoffer Diaz, the screenwriter, playwright, imaginary creative, and the playwright of Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Kristoffer, thank you for being here. When I was doing some research into you, there's so much stuff that you have in your portfolio that really has a strong tie to culture. And really identity is a big part of that. So tell us a little bit about your work outside of Hell's Kitchen. We'll get to that. But tell us a little bit about your creative journey and how you weave culture and identity into that.
Oh man, that's such a great, hard question. I mean, it's foundational, right? I think I started out as a writer when I came to New York. I grew up in Yonkers and just outside of the city. But when I came to the city to study at NYU, I was 18 years old and figuring out sort of like who I was and what my identity was. And theater became a place for me to explore that. So a lot of the work that I was doing at that time was about asking questions of myself and asking like, why do I care about the things that I care about? Why am I the way that I am? Why do I do the dumb things that I do? You know, I think like any young person, you try to make sense of who you are. And we all try to find ways to do that. And for me, those investigations took the form of writing. It started in theater. I was doing some acting, but I wasn't really cut out for that. Found my way into doing theater and would write things about cultural identity. You know, I'm Puerto Rican, but I always say I'm New Yorican more than anything else. My family is from all over. My family, every borough, Jersey, Connecticut, every part of New York City, everything related to New York you could possibly imagine. I don't speak Spanish. I speak a little bit now. I grew up on hip hop more than I grew up on like salsa or anything like that. So it was like trying to understand if that was okay, why I was the way that I was, why those cultural different expressions meant what they meant to me. And writing became a place for it. So over the course of my career, I worked in doing things in hip hop theater. I started writing about professional wrestling because that's what I grew up watching. I write a lot about sports. I write a lot about identity and about now being a parent. So all these things it's fun. It's a fun job where you get to kind of do your therapy and your paying gigs at the same time. You get to work out your stuff while you're, making a living.
Yeah, it's interesting. New Yorican is kind of its own nationality.
Yeah.
Because the culture is kind of like not necessarily speaking Spanish, kind of having like the urban roots rather than, the island roots.
Yeah.
But when it comes to writing is so different than acting. I always hear people talk about how actors are not necessarily creatives in the sense that they're performing somebody else's work. But writers are fully creating a whole world. What do you think the difference is with acting and writing, and why do you think you weren't cut out for acting?
Yeah, I mean, I would frame that same statement in a little bit different way. I would say the writer is a generative artist, not a degenerative artist. Sometimes we're degenerates too, but a generative artist. Like we sit down with a blank piece of paper or a blank, Word document and just ideas in our head. And the whole process of what we actually do is figuring out the way to translate those ideas in our head. Everything from like creating a new world to just creating dialogue, creating songs, and putting them on a page so that actors and other creative folks can execute those ideas and bring what they bring to the table. I mean, like actors are some of the most artistic, brilliant, trained, remarkable artists that I know, but it is a different kind of process. For me, I came to school thinking I was going to be an actor, and then I was just around actors, my friends who wanted to be actors, and some of them had been acting since they were kids. They all had done things like they had professional headshots and they understood about how to go on audition. Auditions are terrible when you're first starting out. You go and stand in a line for 3 hours to do an equity audition. Like that was not for me. I was not cut out for it. So I knew what I cared about was being a part of the theatrical experience. And I spent 2 or 3 years just figuring out what that was going to mean for me. And then finally I found out like I liked the part of it where you sit alone with your thoughts and figure out how to put it onto a page so that then everybody else sort of comes to the table and do the incredible work that they do.
Yeah, it's really meditative. Writing is something that you sit with and you run through all these different options. It's like with each character, I imagine you have like 30 different routes of where you could go.
Yeah.
With one intonation and one phrase and one word.
Yeah.
When you're writing dialogue specifically, what is your process? How do you get into that character's mind to write what they might say?
It depends. I mean, it depends on what stage of the process you're in. The hard thing about doing something like writing the book for a musical or even just writing a play is that people immediately think about exactly that, the dialogue. And the dialogue is actually usually like the fourth or fifth step in the process. We figure out the story. We figure out who these characters are. When we worked on Hell's Kitchen, the things that we knew from the very beginning were who some of these characters were going to be. And Alicia and I spent 2 or 3 years just figuring that stuff out before I ever wrote a line of dialogue. So that's all the backstory. That's all the groundwork that you have to do to get to a place. Then once you know who the character is, what they want, what they need a scene, but also what they need and want from their lives, what their big motivations are, things like that, then it starts to come. In terms of actually writing the dialogue, I do most of my dialogue writing on my phone now, not typing it out, just walking around my house, just talking into it.
Okay.
And you need to hear the voices. You need to know, what is this potentially going to sound like? And when it's good, when the writing is its best, I'm just walking around talking, I look like a crazy person. I'm just walking around talking to myself on the phone, and I'm getting into some version of that character. So you have to be able to hear it. You know, it's different than writing poetry or writing a novel, in that the audience is going to come across when they read your poetry or they read a novel, they're going to read the actual thing that you wrote. On stage, they don't read anything. On stage, they hear the interpretation of somebody else that they bring to the table. So you got to know a little bit about what that rhythm sounds like. And then being, you know, from the New York area, so much of what I write, so many of my characters are New Yorkers. Mm-hmm. And I got to make sure that it sounds like a New Yorker. Just that little thing, like I have to make sure it sounds like a New Yorker versus I got to make sure it sounds like a New Yorker.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you got to just say it.
Oh, yeah. When I watched the play for the first time, I'm like, all right, let's see how accurate they are with this, like New York slang and the dialogue.
No, and that was, for Alicia and I, that was one of the first things from the beginning. She was just like, yo, it has to be for real.
Yeah.
And even that, you know, the way it comes out, that's how it came out of her mouth. Yo, it has to be for real. It's like, yeah, okay, we get it.
Yeah, so for context, this is Hell's Kitchen. The play is kind of about Alicia Keys' young life. Mm-hmm. And it's inspired just kind of like her early story, I guess, like when she was developing as an artist and a young woman. So what is that character's story?
Yeah.
What is the thing that drives her? Just so that the audience can get a picture.
That's a great question. So the thing that you know that's really important for us to say is that it's inspired by Alicia's life. It's not the Alicia Keys story. There's a character in the play whose name is Allie. It's very close to Alicia, but it's not Alicia. The mom in the play is inspired by her mom, but is not exact. You know, there's not factual retellings of exactly what that is. But as we always say, and Alicia says it a lot, it's emotionally true. What we wanted to be after was like the emotional feelings of what it was like when she was in the play. The character is 17 years old. We're talking about things that happened from 14, 15, 16, 17 years old. And she's the one who came up with the idea. She said she wanted to write a show about this time in a young woman's life where they learn a little bit about who they are. And for her, the way that she learned a lot about who she was through music. So it was, how are we going to tell a story about that moment when you're young and music either falls into your lap or is placed in front of you by a teacher or a parent, and it helps you make sense, just like we were talking about, helps you make sense of who you are and what you need. So the character of Allie, that's the stand-in for Alicia, is a mixed race young woman, 17 years old. Mom's white, dad's black, dad's not in the picture. And she lives in artist housing right around the corner from where we are right now in Manhattan Plaza, in Hell's Kitchen. And she is feeling that feeling that so many of us feel when we're teenagers and we have a parent who cares about us a little bit and our perception a little bit too much. And she's suffocated, and she knows that she lives in the heart of New York City, but her mom just wants to keep her in the apartment, keep her safe, and she wants to get out there and do more. So this whole experience takes place over just 3 months over the summer of 1 year, 1995. And it's just this young woman finding her way, and she finds it through music, she finds it through romance, she finds it through relationships with both of her parents, with her friends, and she does it all in New York City. Yeah,
and I'm sure summer 1995, like there was a lot going on, but rightfully so, her mom was trying to keep her in that apartment.
Especially right here.
In 95,
yeah, Alicia always talks about it too. She's like, oh, it was not the same. It was not the same.
No, not at all. So working with her, what's that like? What's her process like? What's her approach? She's a very meticulous artist, I'm sure. How does she go about something like this, which I'm sure is new for her?
Yeah, she's both things, right? She's meticulous and she's got that like that casualness, that openness that you need to have to make the kind of music that she makes, to do this kind of piece. She's incredibly driven. It took us a very long time to work on this show. It took us 13 years from the time we first started to the time we opened I think the time we opened on Broadway. But there was no hesitation. There was no doubt that it was going to happen, because when she sets out to do something, she sees it through. So she's fun and she's cool, and she's my buddy. And half the time I'm just sitting there, we're just vibing and, saying dumb stuff or, working on it, whatever. And then every once in a while, you look over to the cabinet in the corner of her studio, and you're like, oh, there's 15, 16 Grammys over there over your shoulder. Or you'll see her sit down at the piano and start playing something. And you're like, oh, right, you're an actual legitimate genius who actually know how to do things that other human beings don't know how to do. So for me, it's been an incredible process. It was less intimidating than I think it probably could have been, because she's just such a good, open, caring person. But that process has really been, we started the process. We brought in Michael Greif, who's the director. He directed Rent, among many, many other things. Then we brought in people, we accumulated people throughout the process. And it always was a very open room where we were listening to everybody who was there in the room. We were wide open to the kinds of possibilities of what this thing could be. And the vibes were just off the charts. And I think they continue to be. Right now, even in our Broadway company, we're about to open an international tour in Cleveland this week. And the tone that Alicia sets, I think stays all the way through. We're good vibes, only good vibes.
What from the beginning was the goal of this production? Was it to entertain, inspire? Because I felt a lot of things throughout the whole show, and it's very interactive. And I left feeling something that I'm not sure if everybody else was feeling that way. I'm sure there's a ton of different takeaways, but I felt really differently because I'm from Hell's Kitchen, and it's very personal. And I'm just curious what you guys want to do, especially now that you're expanding. What is the impact that you want to leave?
Yeah, I mean, it's all the things that you said and probably 15 other things, right? Like, you don't control what the audience is going to feel necessarily. You can lead them to places. But like you said, it's a different experience if we're talking about your neighborhood. It's a different experience if we're talking about being a mixed race young woman coming of age in a situation. It's a very different experience if you see yourself and people that you know in those characters that are up there. We have people every night who come to the show, and when we get to some of the interactions with the father, who has not been very present in her life, you hear from the reactions in the crowd that you have people who know that guy. They've been through that moment. And we got nods over here in the corner. I'm not going to call people out, but people know what's going on. So you don't control that all the time, but we wanted it to hold all those things. Obviously, one of the biggest things that we wanted to do from the very beginning was give the people who are fans of Alicia Keys those songs, those great songs, some of the greatest songs ever written, frankly. Like, Fallen is just one of the best songs ever written, right? Empire is the national anthem of New York City. You hear it when you walk out of our theater. We knew we wanted to give people experiences with those songs, but we also wanted them to hear them in new ways. We wanted them to know that you could tell story through the songs that were there that were slightly different than the stories that you hear when Alicia sings them. So we wanted to do that. We 100% want to make people cry. It's my favorite thing in the world when people tell me that they going into the show, they're either a mom sitting next to their daughter or a daughter sitting next to their mom. And I'm just like, sorry, but not sorry, you're gonna cry. Like, that's the goal. That's actually the one of the things that we love the most, parents sitting together with their kids. We want people to laugh. We wanted all those kinds of things. And then we wanted to do New York right. We wanted to give, for people who are coming in to see the show, so many are tourists, but so many are New Yorkers. And we wanted to give we wanted to give an interpretation of New York that resonated with somebody from Hell's Kitchen the same way it might resonate from somebody from Iowa or might resonate with somebody from Beijing. We wanted to be able to tell those stories and share the emotional output of that. And then we wanted to just do justice. We wanted to do justice to Alicia's music and to Alicia's story, but also, like, we're in the Schubert Theater, which is the theater where a chorus line ran for decades. We wanted to put something on Broadway that was Broadway worthy. And as Alicia said, hopefully runs for the next 20 years. We wanted to do all of that stuff.
Yeah, y'all definitely put Hell's Kitchen on the map. Like, there's so many different ways to represent it, but that was such an awesome way to do it. Like, with the music and, Manhattan Plaza, all the different characters and stuff. It was so cool. So how does Hell's Kitchen not compare, but what's different about your other work that you've worked on versus something like this? And talk a little bit about your previous projects?
The biggest thing is this is on Broadway, and even the difference between when we did this show on Broadway versus when it started at the Public Theater downtown, we went from about 400 seats downtown to 1,400 seats uptown. Over 1 million people have seen the show on Broadway already, which is ludicrous. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. It makes sense because it's a good show and like we wanted it to be that much. But like, I started as a playwright, and usually our shows run for, maybe 3 or 4 weeks. I have a show that just closed in Chicago that's been running. It was very successful, but our houses were filled with like 50 to 60 people every night. And we did 20-something performances. We've done 600 performances on Broadway now. So that part of it is different. The scale is different. I've never worked with someone of the caliber and reputation, not only of Alicia Keys on this, but Michael Greif or Adam Blackstone, who is the music director of our show and the music director of he's done 6 Super Bowls. He does the Grammys. Tom Kitt, Camille Brown, then folks like Keisha Lewis and Malia Joy Moon, who won Tony Awards for what we do. So the scale of that, of folks at the top of their game, has been really great. Folks that always work with folks at the top of our game. I did a show in Chicago called The Elaborate Entrance of Chad Deity. It was about professional wrestling. We got a Pulitzer Prize. I was a Pulitzer Prize finalist for that show. We rocked that show as well, but we weren't operating on the same size and scale and scope. So I think that's the biggest thing, but the work stays the same on everything. You hold yourself to a high intellectual level. You hold yourself to a high emotional level. You set up the best possible room of collaborators as possible. And I used to say this to Malia, who was our Tony winner for, she was our original Ally, and she won the Tony for it. And every time I saw her, I would just look at her. She was becoming a huge star. She was going to the Met Gala. She was doing all this stuff, well-deserved. And I would look at her every day, and I was like, another day we get to go to work with our friends and make a thing. And that was all we tried to do, So I think we try to keep that vibe as much as possible. So the work on some level stays the same. The scale, very, very different.
Right. How does it feel to be within the ranks of some of the great Latinos in Broadway and in these sort of productions? Because I'm not sure how much of it was a thing, 30 years ago, but it's very much a thing now.
Yeah.
And, you're contributing to that in a big way. So how does it feel?
Yeah. I mean, one of the crazy things is that because Broadway is in New York City, and because because dance is so important to Broadway, and because singing is so important to Broadway, there's always been Latinos. I don't want to say always, but certainly in the common era, Latinos have been everywhere. And folks like Rita Moreno and Chita Rivera, obviously we know that. But you look back at some of the choruses of some of these shows. I had a cousin, a second or third cousin, who was a dancer and a performer in a chorus line in that same building many years ago. So we've been a part of it for a long time, especially Puerto Ricans, obviously. And then once West Side Story comes along, there's a push. It wasn't always Puerto Ricans playing Puerto Ricans in those days, but it became that over time, and became, Latinos of all different backgrounds. So it's a really, I think we're a really important part of the Broadway tradition. And then over the last few decades, it's just become more and more and more present and more visible. Folks like John Leguizamo, who's my mentor, he's the reason that I do what I do. And now he's a dear friend. He's got a show at the Public Theater right now. But the fact that he is a legitimate Broadway star, every time he writes a show, now it goes up on Broadway and it sells out. And people come to the theater who don't come to see anything else. They come for John. And then obviously, the most important artist in the American theater is a New Yorican, Lin-Manuel Miranda. He is such a student of the game of Broadway, but also of hip hop and also of so many Latino cultural expressions that we just end up taking up more and more space and more seats at the table. Hell's Kitchen is not a quote unquote Latino play. We're very interested in this mixed race situation. This young woman is half black, half white. But from the very beginning, we were it is a Latino show because I'm one of the writers of it. So we start there, and it's set in New York City and it's going to be shaped by those folks. So there's a huge Latino presence in our cast. There's a huge Latino presence behind the scenes. When we cast the tour, it was a huge, be aware of that as well. Folks that we're going to be casting and bringing in there. I think it was important to me from the very beginning to know that even though, the focus of this show was not going to be on all the New Yorkers that lived in this apartment building, that there were going to be New Yorkers in that apartment building, and that we were going to do stuff not just in terms of the subject matter, but the way we told stories that felt like it came out of our, cultural experience.
Yeah, and you mentioned hip hop a few times. What has that meant to you? Well, what does hip hop mean to you, and what has it meant to your work, and how does it maybe inspire some of the work that you do now?
Yeah, so I'm born in 1977. I spent the first, 7 months of my gestation in the Bronx. My parents moved out to Yonkers right before I was born. But I grew up literally
That was the first year of hip hop.
As hip hop is happening. I'm, in the womb. And so I came out, and then I get to high school. I get to middle school and high school during, 1988, 1992, and out there for all of this stuff.
It's a golden era.
Golden era, right? So it's so everything about how I figured out who I was as a human was tied to that golden era hip hop stuff. 88 to 92 for me is golden era hip hop. New York City, everything that comes out of that time period is I think it's foundational to the art form. I think it's foundational to me. And then for me as a person who, I left the Bronx. My parents left the Bronx, and we were in the suburbs. We were in Yonkers, which is a slightly different kind of suburb, but we were in the suburbs. And I was navigating that feeling that a lot of times folks who emigrate from one country to another country and think about, oh, is it okay that I left people behind? I'm leaving my way of life, and I'm trying to stay authentic to who I am. I had that experience just moving 15 minutes away, but I was moving from the city, from the Bronx, but moving from a part of the city to a suburb experience that was very different. So hip hop was a big way that it sort of brought me back. My cousins were in the Bronx still, and that's what we would do. We would just hang out and watch OMTV Raps and listen to DJ Red Alert and just build so much of our identities based around that stuff. So it's fundamental to me. When I met with Alicia for the first time, we always say, we did not mention a single piece of musical theater in our first conversation. She's a fan, but we did not talk about that at all. We talked about Wu-Tang, and we talked about Nas, and we talked about all this other stuff. And those were the cultural markers that we had. So I think a big part of why I got to work on this show was because we shared so many of the same formative experiences. And hip hop was a big part of it.
Yeah, I think hip hop encompasses everything, the culture, the essence, the music, everything. And it's always evolving. And, even this now, it's a huge part of it. When I watch Hell's Kitchen, I definitely felt it was hip hop. You know what I mean? It's like a story from the streets. That's what I think hip hop kind of is, that authentic storytelling.
Yeah, and Alicia's an R&B singer and performer, but she's an R&B singer and performer that is fundamentally shaped by hip hop.
Facts, yeah.
So you can't separate those two.
Yeah, 100%. Who are some of your favorite artists, just in general?
Ooh, hip hop artists or whatever?
Just in general, yeah.
Whatever. So Alicia Keys, obviously. Alicia Keys is actually big. Alicia is one of those artists that I was like, oh, I grew up on Alicia Keys, and I'm like, no, I'm older than her. I was out of college when she dropped her first album, but she's sort of foundational in that way. So she's somebody that's present. But before that, hip hop artists that sort of, set things off again. Everybody in that 88 to 92 range. So I'm Big Daddy Kane, Q-Tip, Tribe Called Quest. Then a little bit later, I love the Far Side. That was a huge thing for me. But I also grew up on rock music. I also grew up on, all different kinds of art forms, all different kinds of musical forms. And it's funny, I'm thinking about this because we're going in Cleveland this weekend to see the opening of our tour out there. And I'm taking my youngest son, who's really excited to go partially to see the show. He's seen the show so too many times now, he doesn't really care about that. But he's playing, he started playing electric bass, and he plays rock. And so he's most excited to go. There's Nirvana exhibition there, and there's a Green Day exhibition there. And so that kind of stuff. We listen to a lot of 90s music in our car, a lot of grunge, a lot of kind of stuff. So, a little bit of everything. Then forget about, Prince and Steve. We could go on for hours and hours and hours. Yeah, but music's a huge part of my life.
So being a parent, you said that influences some of your work.
Yeah.
How does it influence your work, and how has that changed you as a man?
Yeah, man. So it changes you a lot in the way to work. First of all, I used to write when I first started. I got out of college, got out of graduate school, and I would write at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and I would stay up all night, literally all night. I'd go to sleep at 6 o'clock in the morning, having worked all night. And you can't do that when you have kids because they're up at 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, and you got to go. So it changes some of your work habits to begin with. It also changes the urgency. There is a certain amount of this is work now. I got family to take care of. So there's that. But more importantly, it rewires you. It rewires your brain in terms of what's important. All that stuff that I said early on in my career about writing about identity and writing about trying to figure out who I was. You don't have to figure that out quite so much anymore when you're a parent, when you're a father. Like, you know that this is a big part of who you are. And the concerns that you start to have now might be a little bit larger in terms of thinking about the world, in terms of thinking about the kind of future you're going to leave behind for your kids. It changes your writing because it changes your being. Is a huge thing. In terms of things that changed on this piece, though, one of the things that was really interesting is when I got hired, Alicia had just had her first son. My wife was pregnant while I got hired. Like, we didn't know that she was pregnant, but we found out that she was pregnant shortly after I got the job. And then we each had another kid. So Alicia had another kid, and my wife and I had another kid. So we went from like one kid between the two of us to 4 altogether. And those kids grew up. Alicia's son is like 6 feet tall, and he's a basketball player, and he's like a superstar. My kids are playing, doing music and doing all this stuff now. And it's baked into the DNA of this show. The central relationship is between a mom and a daughter. And we happen to all have boys, but so much of that story is shaped by the way that we interacted with our kids. And I'll tell you, one of the things very specifically that happened, there's a song in the show, there's a couple songs in the show that I used to sing. I was listening to all of her music, but I used to sing to my kid when he was a baby. I would walk around singing things. And one of the songs that I used to sing to him was No One. And No One is a love song, but No One in our show is, slight spoiler alert, is a love song between a mother and a daughter. And that happened because I used to sing it to my kid. And I was walking around and I was like, oh, these lyrics make perfect sense. I just want you close where you can stay forever. You can be sure that we'll always be together, you and me together through the days and nights. I don't worry because everything's going to be all right. That is so the central story of being a parent. So you find those kinds of new meanings and things too. And I think we tried to bake that into the show.
That's beautiful, man. What was your first piece that you ever worked on? Like your first screenplay or play that you ever wrote?
Wow. It's always a tricky thing because like when you start in school, I probably did something when I was in like grade school, but not really on my mind. But when you start in college, you write so many short little pieces. So I probably wrote a lot of little short pieces like that. But I wrote the first thing that was like a real thing. It was called, this is a bad title. It was called Sausage and Peppers, Junior and Jennifer. It's a terrible title. But it was in response. I had a teacher. I had written something in a college class, and the teacher did not dig it. He was just like, what are you doing? He's like, there's no subtext in this piece. He's like, your characters just say exactly what they're thinking. And I like argued with him in the class. And then I went home and I was like, I know what he wants me to do. So I'm just going to do it one time. I'm going to write something that's all subtext where they're saying one thing, but they're really talking about something else. And so I wrote a piece about 2 friends who were teenagers. They were trading baseball cards, but it was like a power dynamic. One of them wanted to date the other one's sister. And they were like, it was like just a power dynamic play. It's not very groundbreaking, but I was trying to prove this guy wrong. And I was like, oh, this is so much better. This way of writing is so much better. So it was really a piece where I was able to write something that felt really specific and personal to me, but then utilized the advice that I was getting from my teacher, which is a big part of Hell's Kitchen as well. Learning how do you rebel against and then also learn from the mentors in your life. So I learned from that, and it just really, that was a piece that like, it clicked. It all clicked in. And I was like, oh, there's a way to do this that is different than what I thought it was. There's a way to do this that feels rich and full and powerful. And I like it. And it was really fun. And that opened up the doors for everything else.
Yeah, that teacher is like kicking himself now.
He passed many years ago, and I don't think that I actually ever got to go back and be like, "Oh, you were right, man." Like you were, I don't think he ever actually found out that I appreciated so much what he said.
What would be a piece of advice that you would share with the writers or those who are trying to make their way in this industry? Yeah. I know it's always changing, but what's something that you could offer them?
The biggest thing that I say, I just was on the phone with one of my mentees earlier today, and something I said to her a bunch of times, but it's like, you have to figure out what is the thing that you do that nobody else does. What is the thing that you bring to the table that nobody else brings to the table? And nobody else is probably a little bit of an exaggeration, but what's the unique background that you bring? What's the unique skill set that you bring? a big reason that I have the career that I have is because early on, I made the decision not to try to write the things that I thought were going to get produced. I tried not to try to write something that looked just like existing plays, but I wanted to write plays that spoke to me. So I wrote a play that was a hip hop theater play that was set in a bar on the Lower East Side, and it was about the history of hip hop, and had DJs on stage, it had graffiti on stage, it had all this stuff. And it broke a lot of the like rules that I had been taught, but I was like, this is what I know how to do. And people really responded to it. And then a few years later, I was like, I grew up watching professional wrestling. I know this world really, really, really well. And I'm going to write about that. So figuring out the things that you know, like I said, when I went to sit down with Alicia, it was not so much, let me knock you out with how much I know about musical theater. I know quite a bit about musical theater, but what I really knew was this world. So let me tell you that. So I think for anybody who's coming out to enter a career in the arts, and probably in other places too, but certainly in the arts, being able to articulate and express and show what it is that you do differently than everybody else. We were just talking earlier with our audience who's over here in the corner about other members of our cast, and we have this incredible, describe them as a love bomb, Jackie Leone, who's in our play, and Jackie is unlike anybody on Broadway. I just got choked up thinking about Jackie. She's unlike anybody on Broadway. They've got this whole different sensibility than anyone else that we know. And we hired Jackie because Jackie was Jackie. And we needed something like that in our show. So I think that like finding out what it is that makes you singular, makes you stand out, and gives the people around you a reason to say, I want to produce this play, I want to hire this actor, I want to listen to this music. There's a lot of great people doing this work, and being good is one thing. Being talented is another thing. Being unique is central.
So it's like becoming a specialist, kind of carving out a niche, and then just going all in with that.
And being excellent. You still have to be excellent at it. I mean, we talk about Lin-Manuel Miranda. Like, what's so wonderful about Lin is, among many other things, is that Lin is 100% a creature of hip hop and 100% a creature of musical theater. He does both of those things, and he does them at a high level of excellence. And the foundational steps in all of this stuff is, if you're an actor, make sure you learn how to act. Like, it's a simple thing to say, but like some people skip the steps, right? Like you have to work. You have to understand how to break apart a text. You have to understand the right questions to ask, what it means to be on stage, what it means to be present. So you have to learn the technical side of things, but you also have to marry the technical side of things with that intangible that you bring to the table. If you're a Nuyorican from Hell's Kitchen, if you're whoever you are from wherever you are, bring that with you and make people either figure out ways to utilize what you bring to the table or see that you fit into places, whether it was expected or not expected.
You've accomplished a lot, and you're at this point now where I'm sure you have big aspirations for other things. Mm-hmm. What are some of those things, and are those things that you've envisioned for a long time? Are they new?
Yeah.
What are some of those things?
Yeah, I mean, like, Hell's Kitchen has been a way to make a lot of those big dreams come true. It's my first sort of like fully realized musical. It's obviously my first Broadway show. I got to bring my parents to that. Like those are the important things. But then you get hungry, and then you like want to do some other stuff. So I'm working on a couple of other musical projects that we hope are going to make it to Broadway someday. I'm working on a play. That play that I mentioned earlier, The Elaborate Entrance of Chad Deity, is something that we're trying very actively to find a way to bring it to Broadway. Now that the doors have been sort of, for myself, the personal doors have been sort of open for that. So I want to do that. And then there's a million things. I've dabbled in television a little bit. I've dabbled in film from the outside. So I want to do that. I helped to produce a short film earlier this year by this incredible, originally Chicago-based actor Usman Ali, who now is in LA, that film is making the rounds of the film circuit. So we're film festival circuit. That's what I was trying to say. So I wanted to do all of those different kinds of things. We want to find ways to sort of just keep building, taking opportunities to tell stories, tell different stories, and have different voices be heard out there. And like it's nice having a show that's running on Broadway. It's a beautiful thing. So we want to continue to do stuff like that.
Yeah, I love that notion of once you accomplish something that you think was the crown jewel of everything you'd ever accomplish, you just start getting hungrier. You just want to get more and put more in the toolbox.
Exactly.
But yeah, Kristoffer, I really appreciate you coming on with me and sharing your story and giving us a glimpse into, the mind of a writer. I think it's a very deep and imaginative mind.
Oh, appreciate it. This is a great interview, Red, and hopefully everybody gets to come out and check out Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah, everybody
here on
check
Broadway
out
to
Hell's
Schubert.
Kitchen.
Yeah.
You got any shout outs you want to give or something you want to say?
Yeah, so that was the big thing. I come out, Hell's Kitchen at the Schubert Theater right now. Also going on the national tour that's starting this week. We're going to be in Cleveland. After Cleveland, we're going to go out to Chicago. Then we're going to make the rounds all throughout the United States. We're working on some other possible ways for folks to interact with this piece. We've got a book out right now that's about the show, about the making of the show. I could not be happier about that. And then, this entire creative team is just the absolute best. Could not be happier to stand behind it. There's a million things that if I really wanted to mention. I will say this, it's a great time right now at this moment for theater in New York City, not just on Broadway. John Leguizamo has a show downtown. There's an incredible show called Mexodus that I want people to go see. So anyway, I'm not gonna do plugs for every other show in the world, but theater is a great thing. So if you are in New York City, get out to Broadway, get downtown to the other theaters. We need you to come out, do it. I promise you're gonna have a good time.
Go see some shows, everybody. Exactly. All right, Kristoffer.
All right, my pleasure, Red.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Me and my mother live on the 42nd floor of a 44-story building on 43rd Street, right in the heart of the neighborhood some people know as Hell's Kitchen.
Upstairs, now!
And when you hit that ground floor, piano. Always piano.
Good.
Are you teaching me how to play piano right now?
In the face of great resistance, yes.
I was wondering, baby, could I make you my baby? If we do the unthinkable, would it make us look crazy?
And once you get through these doors, it's like all of New York City is singing to you.
This girl is on fire. This girl is on fire. I'm a damn good mother.
The best. I know it.
No one. The only thing I'm ever thinking about is you.
Can't get in the way of what I'm feeling.
You were in pain. That pain led you here. Listen to that pain. Do something with it.
Concrete jungle where dreams are made.
Get ready to write your own story.
You never know what you're gonna hear when these elevator doors open up.